Well, let's talk to Ben Habib, who's a former MEP, he's chairman of the Great British Political Action Committee. Ben, very good morning to you. What do you think of this?
Well, I think it's awful. As I imagine you know, I think it's awful. The Labour Party seems to me don't really believe in the importance or privilege of British citizenry. They see, I think, people from across the globe as being equal in their rights to British citizens, even though it is the British citizen to whom the Labour Party, the elected governing party, owes their obligation. And it seems to have infected our political class quite generally that everyone has a right to this country. Everyone has a right to come to this country. Once they've come to this country, almost irrespective of how they get here, over a period of time, they will become naturalized, have a right either indefinitely to stay or they get British citizenry. And actually, I think, Peter, we need to be going completely in the other direction. We should recognize, as I'm sure the British people do, that we've lost control of our borders, not just illegal migration, but also legal migration. We've lost control. We've got far too many people coming to this country. And what we should do until we've regained control of our borders and settled the position is actually a moratorium, instituting a moratorium on the granting of the indefinite right to stay and a moratorium on granting British citizenship to anyone who's come to this country in the last 3 years and may come in the future. We've got to settle the position. We mustn't be giving away our citizenship. It's a privilege to be a British citizen, and in order to protect that privilege and to protect the people of this country, we need to have a moratorium right now until we've got a grip of the problem that we've created.
It's interesting, actually, when you think about the people who are pretending to be young. There are 1,300 illegal migrants caught. These are the only ones who've been caught pretending to be minors after the cases were flagged with officials. I mean, there are obvious incentives to pretend to be younger than you are, and it's sometimes difficult to tell exactly how old someone is. And there are obvious, very, very worrying things that can happen if someone is designated to be 16 when actually they're 19 or 20.
Yeah, obviously, they could end up, young male adults could end up in schools with vulnerable girls. I mean, call a spade a spade. I mean, that would be horrendous, wouldn't it? And but this is the thing, and it's not restricted to Labour. During the Conservative Party's governance, Border Force were basically instructed not to make too heavy a set of inquiries of those coming to this country, that they could be traumatized, and that even if they're suspected of telling lies, they shouldn't be interrogated too deeply. I don't know if you remember that. And there was a situation, for example, when asylum seekers were given a moratorium on having to be actually physically interviewed. They were given a protection on that. They just had to fill in paperwork and it was automatically passed. We've lost control of our borders. We've got to recognize that. We won't know how to control our borders, how to make sure people don't lie about their age, how to make sure people genuinely have a right to be here before, without actually recognizing first that we've lost control.
Yeah.
That's what's happened. Our government has lost control.
I would love to have spoken to Yvette Cooper this morning. I did ask her advisor if she could come on. She didn't have time, but she's been speaking to Sky News and she spoke about foreign workers and indeed the EU. Let's hear what she said about foreign workers this morning.
We're currently drawing up further measures that will particularly target these areas that you rightly talked about, whether that be in IT, it be in construction, it be in engineering, where for far too long we have been recruiting from abroad and failing to train here in the UK. So there has to be, I think, more requirements on employers. For employers who are wanting to be able to recruit from abroad, actually what they should be doing instead is showing that they are training and recruiting here in the UK.
Yvette Cooper was also asked about her relationship with the EU. This is what she said.
I think the Chancellor said, look, we'll look at reducing ways to reduce frictions. That's absolutely the right thing to do, but we're not returning to a customs union. But those are all the sorts of things that, if you look at, what are the different ways in which you can reduce bureaucracy for business, that is the right thing to do. But you do it in a framework which says, we are outside the EU, we're not returning to the EU, that's been clear, we need to move on and build those better, stronger trading relationships to support businesses.
All right. Ben, what do you make of what Yvette Cooper has been telling Sky News this morning?
Well, as far as the migrant issue is concerned, it's the government that set too low a hurdle for people being allowed into this country. Under the Conservatives, they introduced a point-based system, so-called skills-based, points-based system. But, the minimum salary was set at £26,000 per annum, which is, 25% below the median wage in the UK.
It has gone up, though, Ben, hasn't it?
It is. It has. I think it's 38,000, but even that's not a massive hurdle over which to get. I mean, we shouldn't be allowing businesses to take people other than the very best qualified academics, doctors, and so on, and highly successful businessmen coming to this country. We don't need cheap, unskilled labour or cheap, even semi-skilled labour coming to this country, undermining wages for British workers. I'm sure that's a fundamental part of why we've got 7.2 million people in this country surviving now on universal credit. That figure a year ago was 6 million. Before the pandemic, that figure was 3 million. It's absolutely skyrocketed. And that skyrocketing in people claiming universal credit has happened at exactly the same rate at which our immigration has skyrocketed. So I can't say there's a cause and effect, but there's a huge parallel.
It's a big coincidence, if nothing else.
It's a big
Ben.
coincidence.
Absolutely. Ben, thank you.
And then on the
sorry,
EU,
go ahead.
can I just say quickly on the EU, you can't reduce friction in trade without adopting the regulatory regime that is the European one, and that means getting closer to European laws. Yvette Cooper is lying if she's saying that we can reduce friction in trade without actually mimicking the EU regulatory framework, in which case we shouldn't have left. What we've got to do is ditch EU regulations. We've got to wake up to what America's doing. They're going to supercharge their economy. If we keep hitching our bandwagon to the EU, we're going to see our economy even more greatly damaged. Trump is going to shine a light on what's so wrong with the European economic model. And if we don't get on board with the Trumpian model, we are going to lose out big time.
Although isn't he taking a huge risk in terms of the large level of tariffs? Or maybe that risk you think will pay off, Ben?
Well, actually, Peter, tariffs, the global free trade that we've had over the last few decades has gone, that too has gone out of control. And think of free trade as reverse immigration. You're offshoring jobs. It's not quite the same as taking people onto your shores to do those jobs, but you're giving away British jobs to foreign entities. And I think Trump has realized that we've had far too much free trade. It's created geopolitical risk. We have empowered China. We've made China a really rich country on the back of its exports. It has now used that money that we've given them to become a military superpower. We've got to readjust the whole global economic ecosystem. And tariffs is one way of doing it. And I think Trump's woken up to it.
OK, Ben Habib, thank you very much for your contribution this morning. Ben is a former MEP. He's also chairman of the Great British Political Action Committee.